Purim gives us a fascinating glimpse into the social world, the cultural, historical origin of a religious festival that 2,500 plus years later is still faithfully celebrated around the world. And what's at stake here in Esther is nothing less than the continuance of the chosen people's existence. And so this holiday commemorates God's activity in preserving the Jewish people as he works behind the scenes to orchestrate and weave a tapestry of redemption for the Jewish people. And so that's why it's an important holiday. That's why it's a widely celebrated. It's not like the Jewish people got together, and said one day, there is a very large opening between Tabernacles and Passover. We should stick something in there, in that space. But these days are to be remembered. Zachor is the key word here. These days, Esther 9, important verse. These 18 through 28. These days were to be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city. And these days of Purim not to fail from among the Jews, or the memory fade from their descendants. All right. Well, when we talk about Purim customs, there are several, but the most important, the central custom, is the reading of what's called the Megillah, the scroll of Esther. And it is a participatory reading where, while it's being read, the audience, the congregation, participates. And how does one participate? One participates through the making of noise, cheering for the hero, Mordecai, booing for the villain, and oohing or eyeing for the heroine, Esther. And when we make noise, we generally use what's called a grogger. Now, I actually happen to have a box of groggers right here in the front. I'm wondering if I can get somebody to come and, thank you, There's not one for everybody. We lose a few more groggers every year. But go ahead and take a handful, guys. Yes, exactly right. And try to distribute them equally. Please put them in the responsible hands, the hands of someone who looks fairly responsible. It's one of the reasons that we did this after the children are gone, because otherwise it would be all the way through the service. But it gives us an opportunity to have some fun as well with these noisemakers or groggers. So we're going to do not a whole Megillah reading, though it wouldn't take that long. We're going to do a truncated, a shortened version of the reading. And the story begins, of course, by introducing the king of Persia. This doesn't take place in Israel. It takes place in the diaspora. In Persia, we meet the king of Persia, Ahasuerus, and he decides to have a banquet. And this is one of those multi-day banquets. And at the same time, chapter 1 tells us there is a commensurate, simultaneous banquet that is held by his queen, Vashti. And so the men are having a banquet, multi-day banquet. The women are having a multi-day banquet. After a certain amount of days, King Ahasuerus wants to show off the beauty of his wife. She's already having fun with her own banquet with her gals, and he summons for her to come, and she says, no, you guys are going to have a day without women. And so King Ahasuerus says, okay, you're going to have a head without a crown, and I'm going to replace you. And so to replace Queen Vashti, to fill that all-important role, he has a beauty contest with all the gorgeous gals all throughout the Persian Empire, and that includes the Jewish ones like Esther. And Esther doesn't tell anybody she's Jewish. She keeps that on the down low, but she stays. Her Jewishness is in the closet, literally. And She, of course, becomes the winner of the beauty contest. He says, "You are it. You win $1.98 and the crown of Persia." And she becomes the queen. Again, through a set of fortuitous circumstances. Now we get to chapter 3, now that we've set the stage. After these events, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman. Yes, when we get to Haman, now you know, those who have been through it before, you boo Haman, you make the grogger sound, stamp your feet if you want. The reason you stamp your feet is some people would write the name of Haman on the sole of their foot. Yeah, I just said it. Yeah, on the sole of their foot, and they would eradicate the name. See, Haman is an Amalekite. Yeah, and the name of the Amalekites are to be eradicated. So easy now, okay? To everything there is a season. Turn, turn, turn. Okay, let us have no grogger revolving before its time. So this individual, who shall remain nameless, he who shall not be named, Voldemort, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and established his authority over all the princes who were with him. So, again, fortuitous circumstances for what's going to turn on, for who's going to turn out to be the bad guy. But nonetheless, all these events are coming to a head. All the king's servants and all the king's men, they couldn't put Humpty Dumpty. No, they were at the king's gate. They bowed low, and they paid homage to, did I say the name? And they paid homage to Haman. But so the king commanded concerning him, but Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why are you transgressing the king's command?" Now it was when they had spoken daily to him, and he would not listen to them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's reason would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. That was the reason that he gave, why he would not bow. When Haman saw that Mordecai neither bowed down nor paid homage to him, Haman was filled with rage, when he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him who the people of Mordecai were. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. Right? Now listen, you have to pace yourself. Okay? Don't give everything in chapter 3 because we have multiple chapters to go through. Save some in reserve. Okay? In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, it's a month, not a car. In the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, Pur, that is, the lot, was cast before Haman from day to day and from month to month until the 12th month, that is the month Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of all other people, and they do not observe the king's laws. So it is not in the king's interest to let them remain. If it is pleasing to the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who carry on the king's business to put into the king's treasuries." Then the king took a signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said to Haman, "The silver is yours, the people also, to do with them as you please." When Mordecai learned all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city and wailed loudly and bitterly, because they're very uncomfortable, the sackcloth and ashes. Because he's mourning because of this decree. He went as far as the king's gate, for no one was able to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. There was a dress code, after all. In each and every province where the command and decree of the king came, there was great mourning among the Jews with fasting, weeping, and wailing, and many lay in sackcloth and ashes. Then Esther and her eunuchs, her eunuchs came and told her, and the queen writhed. She writhed in great anguish. And she sent garments to clothe Mordecai, that he might remove his sackcloth from him, but he did not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hatach, from the king's eunuchs, whom the king had appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And Hatach went to Mordecai to the square in front of the king's gate. Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact amount of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict which had been issued in Susa for the destruction, that he might show Esther and inform her, and to order her to go into the king to implore his favor and to plead with her for his people. Hatach came back and related Mordecai's words to Esther. Then Esther spoke to Hatach and ordered him to reply to Mordecai. Poor Hatach, he doesn't get any sounds. All right. Bad enough he's a eunuch. All right. All the king's servants and all the people of the king's provinces know that for any man or woman who comes to the king, to the inner court, who is not summoned, he has but one law, that he shall be put to death. Unless the king holds out to him the golden scepter, so that he may live. And I have not been summoned to come to the king for these 30 days. And they related Esther's words to Mordecai. Then Mordecai told them the reply to Esther. Do not imagine that you are in the king's palace, that you can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place. And you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this. It's an important line. Not the second half, which everybody quotes and says, out of context, hey, you have been put into this position for such a time as this. That's the famous line, of course, from Esther, which I just said. I think the more important line is, if you remain silent, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place. That we, locally, may be wiped out, but God will preserve the Jewish people. Mordecai is certain of this. He has confidence, he has faith that God is faithful to his people, to the chosen people, and that even though there is an attempt to wipe them out, relief will come. Rescue will come. Maybe not this particular group, but the Jews as a whole will not be wiped out. And if that is the case, then why don't we participate? If God's preservation of the Jewish people is a certainty, then why would you not want to participate in that certainty and get on board with God's agenda? That's ultimately what he is saying to her. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go assemble all the Jews who are found in Susa, fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. Fast and furious. I and my maidens also will fast in the same furious way, and thus I will go into the king, which is not according to the law. I'm going to buck the system. And if I perish, I perish. I am on board, in other words, with God's agenda. It's a great example for us. No matter the cost, no matter the potential cost. So, Mordecai went away and did just as Esther had commanded him. When the king saw Esther, the queen, standing in the court, she obtained favor in his sight. And the king extended to Esther the golden scepter, which was in his hand. Esther said, if it pleases the king, may the king and Haman come this day to the banquet that I have prepared for him. See, she actually apparently was a very good cook, because this banquet is and it's interesting because Esther finds herself as a gyp, and that's a Jewish Persian princess, and generally you can't necessarily count that they're going to be terrific in the kitchen, but she apparently is, and she has this wonderful banquet. Then Haman went out that day glad and pleased of heart, but when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, and he did not stand up or tremble before him, Haman was filled with anger against Mordecai. Haman controlled himself, however, went to his house and sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh. And then Haman recounted to them the glory of his riches and the number of his sons, in every instance where the king had magnified him, and how he had promoted him above the princes and servants of the king. Dig me, in other words. Haman also said, even Esther, the queen, let no one but me come with the king to the banquet which she had prepared. And tomorrow also I am invited by her with the king. Yet all of this does not satisfy me. Every time I see Mordecai, the Jew, sitting in the king's gate. Zeresh, his wife, the bad guy's wife, and all his friends said to him, have a gallows 50 cubits high made, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai hanged on it, and then go joyfully with the king to the banquet. We're going to skip a little bit. So the king said, who's in the court? Then Haman had just entered the outer court of the king's palace in order to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows, which he had prepared for him. The king's servant said to him, behold, Haman is standing in the court. And the king said, let him come in. Delightful banquet. So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what is to be done for whom the king desires to honor? And Haman said to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? And then the king said to Haman, take quickly the robes and the horse, as you have said, and do so for Mordecai, the Jew, who is sitting at the king's gate. Do not fall short in anything of all that you have said. And so instead of the one guy receiving all the glory, surprisingly, upside down, tipsy-turvy story, the good guy gets all the stuff from Haman. So Haman took the robe and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city square and proclaimed before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor. Then Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman, he turned home, he hurried home, mourning, with his head covered. So again, themes of elevation, fall. Elevation, fall. Surprise, up and down. And Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman hurried home mourning with his head covered. Haman recounted to Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. And then his wise men and Zeresh his wife said to him, if Mordecai, before whom you have begun to fall, is of Jewish origin, and he is, you will not overcome him, but will surely fall before him. You cannot prevail against God's chosen people, no matter how much power it seems you have at the time. These things are subject to change. Now, let's talk about Purim customs and obligations. When we talk about, we talked about the Megillah reading, and we did a shortened version of it. We'll read a little bit more in a little bit. But there are normally what's called Purim spiels. These are costume parties and Purim plays, and sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're hysterical, sometimes they're done by the young children, sometimes they're done by the adults, but this is one of the customs. Of course, the wearing of costumes. We saw some of us wearing costumes today in recognition of the holiday. And again, it is in recognition of the topsy-turvy. Hey, she pretended to be a Persian princess, but she was actually a Jewish Persian princess. And so the masks come off. You think that one individual is elevated, but it winds up being the other guy. So hence the costumes. And during this period of time is the idea of eating, drinking, and being merry. It is a happy time. And the phrase hanahafahu simply means down is up is down. This is one of the concepts of this holiday. Now, let's talk about the groggers. We've also the making the noise. We've talked about that, the various different participations regarding the name. But for holidays, for me, food becomes most critical, most central to a holiday like Purim. And when we think of Purim and foods for Purim, there's not a lot of variety. I've always thought that this was a tremendous opportunity that was lost. The only variety in eating the Hummentaschen, these cookies, is what... Now listen, don't criticize anybody's baking, please. Let's be kind to one another. Let's love one another. Right? We've been talking about that for weeks. But when it comes to eating these special three-cornered cookies, these Taschen cookies, the variety comes in what they're stuffed in, right? What kind of filling, whether you get apricot, whether you get prune, chocolate, poppy seed, all kinds of, and we eat Hummentaschen, these special cookies, as a reminder of the holidays. They're called Haman's pockets. Haman's stuff with bribes, okay, is the idea. But I don't know anything about pockets that have 3 corners on them. My pockets have 4 corners, so I don't like that idea. Some talk about the Hummentaschen as a hat, that Haman wore a 3-cornered hat. But I didn't remember that this guy was also a participant in the Revolutionary War, wearing a 3-cornered hat. And some think that these corners, the Hummentaschen, simply means Haman's ears, which would lead one to believe that Haman had pointy ears. He's a Vulcan. But we remember the defeat of this villain by eating a sweet and delicious food. And again, I've often thought, you've been with me for many years, many Purims, some of you, and I've often thought that there's so much room out there to spread out and increase the number and quality and quantity of important Purim foods. One can only eat Hummentaschen so long for a holiday like this. So I thought instead of reminding ourselves of this villain from long, long ago, we have more contemporary villains that we could think about today. And if they come against the Jewish people, we can eat in their memory. So you have, for example, the leader of Iran, okay? Khamenei, right? Do you know this guy? Ali Khamenei. And I thought, what kind of food would I eat to celebrate Ali Khamenei's defeat? Khamenei chow mein, a baby. Kamani kalachi, okay, spread it out a little bit. Or how about kamani fried chicken, KFC for short. It's finger-licking good, absolutely. But then you now have not just one leader in Iran, you have the other guy, Rouhani, Hassan Rouhani, right? So what would we eat in memory of Rouhani? Rack of Rouhani, all right? Raisa Rouhani, Rocky Rouhani ice cream. All right, then of course there's the ever-present danger in Israel, the Jewish people, of Hamas. What kind of food can we eat to celebrate the defeat of Hamas? Hummus, that would be good. What about the other terrorist group in Israel? Hezbollah, what would we eat? Hezbollahs, why not? Okay, in memory, all right? And then of course there's a very large villain from the north, Putin, right? We know this guy, Putin, who's been the Tsar of Russia for how many years now? 2 decades, 2.5 decades, whatever it is, right? So when he's gone, I can't wait to think about what we're going to eat. I have so many ideas in my head. Let me share a few with you. Putin brittle. So good. You got to watch out for your teeth, though. Putin brittle. Putin butter and jelly. It's a little softer, goes down a little easier. It's a perennial favorite. Jello Putin Pops. Putin Pops. Right. Putin nickel bread. It's good. Good for you. Yorkshire Putin. Get a little exotic, right? How about Putin de Gallo? That's got to be a favorite, local favorite here. Putin platter. That's also good. Putin on the Ritz, my personal favorite. It's a wonderful snack. And then, well, now we pause for a moment. In memoriam, these next groups and people, they have already passed, and somehow their special dishes have not caught on. So it may be that these guys will never get special food that the Jews eat to remember. So in memoriam, those enemies who have passed on already. First of which, ISIS. Remember ISIS. ISIS has been defeated. So somehow we missed out on ISIS. ISIS, very disappointing to me. And then, of course, Bashar al-Baghdadi. Right, you can go ahead. Yeah, why not? Al-Baghdadi. Not rest in peace, right? What shall we eat to remember al-Baghdadi? Al-Baghdadi doodles, okay, so delicious, so crunchy, and they leave that orange dust on your fingers. Oh, and speaking about timely, you know this guy, Qasem Soleimani. Yes, boo to him. He was, because his death so timely this year, along with Baghdadi, it really got me to thinking, what should I like to eat in remembrance of Soleimani? And none of these have caught on, but I wanted to share them with you nonetheless. There's 3 that I think are good for Soleimani. Okay. First of all, Soleimani salami. I never had that. I never had the Soleimani salami. He passed away. All right. How about Soleimani souvlaki? Delicious. And finally, for those who are on the other side of the world, Soleimani sukiyaki. So delicious. What happened there? Okay. What happened? Of course, we have Torah reading, which we, the Megillah reading, the sending of portions. What does it mean to send portions? It means, man, I'm stuck with all this humantashen and all this extra stuff. Let me get rid of it and send it to some friends. No, it is, and the idea is to share your food with other people and to give especially gifts to the poor, to remember the poor during this period of time. Now, the Jews who were in Susa assembled on the 13th and 14th of the same month. They rested on the 15th day, made it a day of feasting and rejoicing. Why did they do this? Because there was a decree the king had made that the Jews were to die. Couldn't take that back. It was the law of the Medes and the Persians. So Esther climaxes with the king saying, okay, I can't change the decree of the Jews being persecuted, but I can give them the right to self-defense. They can arm themselves. They can fight back. And that's indeed what happens. And that makes it they are victorious, and it's a day of feasting and rejoicing. Therefore, the Jews of the rural areas, they made it a holiday for rejoicing and feasting and sending portions of food to one another. And Mordecai recorded all these events. Yeah, right. And the whole idea about Purim, it's an interesting thing, because it wasn't the priesthood who commanded that this holiday be celebrated thereafter. It wasn't the king. It wasn't the prince. It wasn't the prophet. It was just a Jewish guy, Mordecai. Obviously, he's in a position of influence. And he writes to the Jewish community throughout Persia that this is going to be an annual holiday. Talk about influence, inordinate influence. And this holiday catches on, not just in Persia, but throughout the Jewish diaspora, throughout Israel, outside of Israel, the Jewish people begin to, and it all starts with a letter, circular letter, from one faithful Jewish guy named Mordecai. Can one person make a difference? Yeah. Can one person change the world? Yes. Can one person be the instrument of God's destiny for his chosen people? Yes. So the question that I have for you today, honest survey question, is who is the biggest hero / heroine of Purim? Who's the main hero? There's obviously a main hero and the secondary hero. Maybe they're equal. Right? Who would say that Esther is the main hero of the Purim story? Raise your hand. Okay. All right. Put them down. Who would say that Mordecai is the main hero? Okay, slightly more. Who would say that they're of equal? Okay, even less. So half of you didn't vote. Let's one more time. Okay, now that you've seen everybody, they've showed you their hands, right? So you don't have to worry about being on the hook. Mordecai being the main hero. How many? Okay. Esther being the main hero. Okay. Both equally the main hero. God, the main hero. Yeah, okay, yeah, right, okay, yeah. Yeah. God is the unseen force. But the thing about God in Purim is that he uses individuals. Some placed into positions of power. Why? A fluke of genetics. Esther was pretty. She won a beauty contest. She had sex appeal for the Persian king. And so she didn't do that. That wasn't something in her character. Esther doesn't show her character until she stands up to the fear that the king is going to banish her, that the king is not going to extend a scepter to her when she approaches him unannounced. Mordecai, is he showing courage when he does not bow before Haman? Maybe. Was he the only Jew? The Jewish people not bow before royalty? I have nothing in the Jewish, in the Torah or anywhere else that tells me that Jews aren't to bow or be subject to the kings or to the royalty or the governmental circumstances they find themselves under. So something about Mordecai, and he gives the excuse, this is the reason, says, I'm Jewish, and I will. But if Mordecai had not taken a stand by not bowing, okay, by not taking a knee, took a stand, would Haman have come against the Jews to begin? Would there have been a Jewish threat to begin with? No. It's interesting. So people affect what happens to the Jewish people, but God overrides the effect, and God superintends, nonetheless, what happens to the Jewish people. Let's skip that. Let's talk about why Mordecai thought that there would be deliverance from another place. The Abrahamic covenant. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you. Genesis 12:3. That as you treat the Jewish people, you will be treated. Divine retribution. If you're good to the Jewish people, you'll be blessed. If it doesn't work so well for you, if you don't treat the Jewish people so well, you'll be cursed. What winds up happening to Haman, to the villain of this story? Those of you who have read ahead know the spoilers. Haman and his 10 sons are hanged on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. What he had expected to be done to his enemy wound up being done to him. Why? Retributive justice, the Abrahamic covenant. And the Abrahamic covenant is augmented by the promise laid out in the new covenant that God would never abandon the Jewish people. Jeremiah 31, we're just going to read 35 through 37. Thus said the Lord, who gives the sun for light by day, the fixed order of the moon and the stars for light at night, who stirs up the sea so that his waves roar. The Lord of hosts is his name. Here's the key verse. If this fixed order, what? The sun, the stars, the sky, moon. If this fixed order departs from before me, declares the Lord, then the offspring of Israel also will cease from being a nation before me forever. So if you try to destroy the Jewish people, what is the key to destroying the Jewish people? It's laid out right here by the Lord in Jeremiah. Knock the sun, the stars, the moon out of the sky. If you can do that, only then can you destroy the Jewish people. Thus says the Lord, if the heavens above can be measured, the foundations of the earth searched out below, then, only then, will I cast off all the offspring of Israel for all that they have done, declares the Lord. God is going to protect the Jewish people. So, let's close up. Where's the Messiah in the book of Esther? Can we see Yeshua in Esther? We see a key concept about the Messianic people, and that's God's use of providence to secure the survival of the Jewish people in the diaspora. God's name nowhere in this book. That makes Esther unique from all other books. No reference to God, no mention of God, no prayer to God whatsoever. The author of to me, it's like the author of the book is deliberately going out of his way to avoid mentioning God. This is the main example in Scripture. It's not provided anywhere else. It shows how God works by means of providence, behind the scenes. So many other passages in Scripture, famous passages, show God directly intervening. Right? Those are the ones that we've made all the movies out of, right? But throughout most of human history, God chooses to work providentially rather than by means of direct intervention. And this book is a fantastic example of how that system works. God used providence to secure the survival of Israel, working behind the scenes throughout the dispersion. We're still in the dispersion now. While segments of the Jewish people may be executed, may be killed throughout our history, as it was in the Holocaust, when we lost a third. God has guaranteed that the Jews as a people and as a nation will survive. And it will be that way until Israel's national salvation and the return of Mashiach. With Israel's national corporate salvation. When they recognize with one voice as one people the Messiah whom they have pierced, He returns and rescues them. There will never again, no further threat to Jewish survival whatsoever. That, to me, is what I remember at Purim. So when we think about all the different kinds of cookies or foods or what have you, that we remember, okay, Tashin and Haman and the threat of the Jewish people have threats against them on the regular. Right? There's always some king, some prime minister, some petty tyrant dictator trying to destroy the Jewish people, decimate them, annihilate them, exile them, exterminate them. Today is no different. I believe in a sense memory, using your senses to help you remember theological concepts. So let me close by simply encouraging you to remember God's providence and protection of the Jewish people. Eat. Eat! And that is why we're going to be celebrating today and having our Oneg Shabbat, our beautiful meal together. Not just the cookies, but we're going to eat because eating on this holiday helps us to remember what God has done. Okay? With every chew, with every taste, we can savor and enjoy God's love and God's promises for His Jewish people.